This must be something about how it's possible to enjoy people and have really good adventures, safe, not crazy times. At least, I mean, I know some of it gets crazy, but on a bike.
Oh yeah, on the bike. Well, one of the things when we left, going from working a 9-to-5 job, having a car, and living in the States, and then going to riding on a bike all the time. When you're on a bike, you're completely exposed. There's nothing that you can't get behind the window of a car. You can't go inside. You are there. And at first, I felt very vulnerable. Am I going to be, vulnerable to people coming up to me and attacking me? And what I learned on the road was just the complete opposite, that being on the bike made me more approachable. People were like, "Oh, you're on a bike. Oh, I want to see." And the kids would come over and want to talk to us and look at our stuff. And so,
what an unexpected result. I would never have thought of an answer like that to my question. But it makes a lot of sense.
And so...
Because, you guys were saying that the people in China, especially, not just there, but they would come up and in fact, they all ended up in your same hotel room, or the room that was like a hotel room.
Right.
So people were able to get to you.
Yeah, well, we were approachable. And because we were approachable, we were not as frightening to them. Now think about it. I'm afraid of them. Well, I never thought about people being frightened of us.
This is great.
And so we were right there. We could, we couldn't run away. We didn't just go off in a bus. And so it made it very approachable. And so we had different experiences. We were much more in the ground level of society, as we like to say. We were there with people rather than just looking out a bus window and seeing things go on. We were in there with the smells and the sounds and everything.
It is possible to miss half the trip when your windows are rolled up, the air conditioner's on, and you're just rolling down the highway at 70 miles an hour.
That's true. One time I was in a cantina in Mexico, and they were all standing around talking about why is this North American, riding a bike when they could be in a camper or in a bus and stuff. And they had a big argument in the cantina. And finally, an old gentleman stood up, and they have a lot of respect for the older generation of Mexico. And he said, on the bus, he could see Mexico, but on the bike, you can feel Mexico. And that's what it is. You feel the country instead of just see it.
I totally agree. And so when I became more comfortable on my bike, I was suddenly much more approachable to people. I wasn't a frightened, a foreigner. I wasn't looked at as just a foreigner. I was looked at as someone who came into town on a bike and, oh, this person looks interesting, let me go investigate. And we were invited into people's homes, extremely generous in Mexico. And it's just amazing treatment. And so we wanted to tell people what we saw, that, well, maybe what you think is out there is not there, but here's what happened to us.
Okay, down the road in South America, I know that we all agree that whatever lessons you learned in South America are what you need to get around the rest of the world.
That's true.
As ladies and gentlemen and citizens of the world.
How to respect other cultures.
I met these people at the Hilly 100, that 8-part series that I've done. What did you learn about what people from the U.S. ought to know? Of course, we're talking about yourselves.
What comes to mind first is, how I talked about people said that we were going to be killed in Mexico, and a lot of fear about poverty. And one of the first things we learned is poverty does not equal crime. Just because you're in an area where people are poor doesn't mean they're going to rob you. And I really felt that was an important thing to get across to Americans. Plus, I just wanted to introduce the rest of the world to America, and not out of fear, but out of, as other human beings, that really we all do the same thing.
Oh, I've got to interject something here that this makes me think of, Tim. When I was in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is where I spent half my life, sometimes I'd be with people as we'd be driving through neighborhoods that were poorer than the people who were driving the car. Not necessarily poorer than what I came from. Some people thought my family was poor. I never thought that. I just didn't think like that. But when I would be with people who were driving through these kinds of neighborhoods, sometimes I'd hear all their door locks go down. And you're on a bicycle. There's no door to lock. Aren't you scared to death?
No, the people are generally people. I don't think poverty equals crime, but drugs and alcohol, that's what equals crime. So if I was in the inner city and it looked like there was a lot of drug addicts around, then I would be afraid. But if we're riding just through your standard neighborhood or even a country rural area, these people aren't interested in stealing from you. They're farmers. They have enough to eat. They're not desperate. They just don't have a Nintendo sitting at home or a big flat screen TV, but they're not desperate and they don't want to steal from you because you get in trouble for that sort of thing.
Did you see people playing games outside? Anymore you don't see, in the United States, you don't see that many people in most places outside anymore. It used to be, I know it had to be this way when you were growing up too, you got outside and you played.
Oh, in Mexico, I remember in particular, there was always something being kicked down the road by the kids. It could be a can, it could be even trash. Sometimes the soccer ball if they had it, but they were always playing outside. Kids were always outside, and that's what made us approachable, is they were already outside, we were outside.
Remember any funny or tender moments, especially when kids saw you and they said, whoa, what is this coming down the road?
All the time. There was a little boy, again in Mexico, who just was so excited to meet us, and this was before we had learned much Spanish. And he just wanted to have his picture and to sit on the bike and get his picture taken on Cindy's bike. There's another time in Peru where I think there's a cartoon there called Tim the Dinosaur. And I would introduce myself as Timoteo, Tim. And they would immediately say, Timoteo the Dinosaur, which...
Dinosaur.
Yeah, okay. And they would immediately connect me with the cartoon. So everywhere I went, I'd tell them my name is Tim, and they'd say, oh yeah, Tim the Dinosaur.
Yeah, I do remember Francisco, and he wanted to try on my helmet. I mean, that's a common thing, is kids wanting to try on the helmet. Because they really don't see people ride bikes with a helmet most of the time. Most people just ride bikes without them in the areas we've been through. And so they want to try on the helmet and the sunglasses and just see what it's like with all that stuff on. It's pretty. They just love it.
Did you notice that? What did you notice about the sense of humor in, let's say, Central America?
Central America, in some places they had a pretty good sense of humor, but Central America was hard because we had gone through Nicaragua not that long after Hurricane Mitch had come through and really wiped out Honduras and wiped out villages. And so they were in the process of rebuilding. So they were under a strain. They weren't gloomy, but the sense of humor was there at times and extremely helpful. But I could tell that they had a little bit better times. Where in Mexico, they are so silly. I love Mexicans for their sense of humor. They just love the silliness of life. And that's really where I learned what Manana really meant. I mean, take your time, slow down. And that was one of the benefits for me from going from the U.S., which is very fast-paced, and a job and a car, and then going into Mexico, where I just had to learn to be patient.